Hi.
Hello.
Good morning. So Allie Gerler is here to chat with us today about email marketing and all the things, and we'll probably end up talking about that too. But we've been talking about how green it is and how it's finally warm, and it went from like not warm at all to hot overnight. And so I was joking. I'm like, I'm dressed fancy right now with my fancy like long cardigan, but really it's too hot. And so as soon as we're done talking, I will be turning the fan back on. But I refuse to turn on the AC. I refuse.
Oh, I have it on. I'm a weakling. We're down here in the South in Nebraska. We're a couple states south. No, I turn it on, but it's that balance between like you have to turn your heat on at night because it's going to get down to like, I don't know, 55 degrees in this house, and then it's going to get up into the 90s like the next day. So like when I was gone for a weekend, I'm like, what do you set it at? Like, do I want to come back and have it be musty, or do I want to waste a ton of air conditioning?
So we just had a solar energy consult, and the guy's like, get a Nest because you can program it from your phone, so you can actually like bring it up before you get out of bed. And I'm like, oh, I like that.
I'm in a rental. I guess just assume that I can't do stuff like that, but I probably could.
Yeah, I think that's a question to ask. That would be important.
That would be like that.
So talk to me about email marketing. I mean, I know we've had conversations like over the last couple of years, and we haven't talked in a long time.
No.
And it's actually sooner that we're getting to hop online here together than to actually schedule a coffee chat that I think we've each rescheduled at least once or twice because it has been a crazy spring. So what's new with you? Talk to me about like what's going on in your business. And
so Duet is my business. It'll be 4 years old on August 1st. And so it's crazy because I remember talking with Bjork from Food Blogger Pro, and he's like, you should grow your team. This was like a year and a half ago. And I was like, LOL, never. And then I've grown my team, and I really love having a team. So I was like, look at you, Bjork, just sending me on my way. He knew. And so, I've got a team of like 6 subcontractors now. I just promoted somebody from within my team up to a new role. It's going to take a lot of training, but it's basically like the take my brain so that I can go on vacation role. Like the things that I'm bottlenecking, especially like that stuff just makes me nervous. And I'm still trying to figure out kind of the balance between like being like the lead strategist, but not having to have a say in absolutely everything. So
that's a big change. And I'm not good at that either, as it turns out. So
big one. And like project management, because my projects are like 12 weeks long. So I do email marketing from like everything from I do an audit to audience research, content strategy, copywriting, and then the tech setup and turning it all on live. So it's just a long process. You could try and push that into an intensive, but it's not that style. So there's just a lot of pieces moving a lot of the time for a lot of different clients. And so I have, a project manager. My team is awesome. Like I see that they're having fun chatting with my clients, like our clients in my inbox. It just cracks me up. I'm like, look, everyone's friends and it doesn't have to just be on Allie. And so it's been really sweet. That brings along its own sorts of challenges than when you just did it all by yourself. So
and it's like, do you want to hire someone who's junior, who doesn't have the skill set yet, but who has like really good like baseline skills, but isn't quite to where you need them to be yet, and train them up so that they learn your methodology? Or do you hire someone who knows what they're doing, and then do you have like a little bit of clash with process and procedure? It's challenging.
Like, that was kind of the decision I needed to make. And part of it is like when you hire a specialist, are they really an integrated part of your team? Like, and that's kind of what it felt like, because they do cost more and their time does need to be used more efficiently. It feels almost like they're kind of like a consultant to your agency in a way. Whereas like this team member has been super faithful over the last year with like everything we've thrown at her and more. You know, my project manager went on maternity leave for 3 months and this gal stepped up. And so I see a ton of like capability there. She's also super loyal. Like that's one of my top things. I'm an Enneagram 6. I'm like, I will never leave you if you never leave me. Like we are in this together. And so, so really and I swear teachers as VAs are just like
The best.
The freaking best. Like,
The best.
the best. Because she's like organized, responsible, creative, like, personable, all these things. So really it's just a matter of like refining.
And they don't have parents yelling at them when they're at VA.
Right. She's like, well, pandemic, bye. I'm going to go be a VA. So yeah, I'm excited for that. I also know it's going to be a long journey. I'm also like unmarried without kids. So I've got time. Like I'm dating someone, but like we don't have any dates in mind. Like there are no children on the horizon. But I'm like, I'd rather like do this process well than feel like I kind of have to rush everyone.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Like I started when my kids were little.
Okay.
So I've worked in some online businesses before. So like it wasn't new to me in terms of process, procedure, how to run things, how to manage projects, but like finding the time. And you talked about VIP intensives. I really like to do things intensive style, but I don't like to do VIP days because it is so much pressure and it doesn't let me take the strategy. And I can shorten my process down to a week. Like that is as short as I'm comfortable going. Because at some point there's this quality time handoff, and I don't like to hand things over half done. And
Yeah.
I want it to be well thought out. All the things. So
Yeah.
it's interesting that you're talking about that because so many people, and I get why VIP days are so attractive. Like
For some things, yeah. And like part of it is I just know who I work with. And the kind of clients I work with are people who've been blogging 5, 10, 15 years. And they have a lot of content to like make sure that we know about. So we do what we call like a copy prep. So once we've locked in the strategy, it's a matter of like sourcing all the information, right? Because especially if you've been blogging that long, you're like, well, don't link to any of these blog posts because those are like, like just to know, I guess I should explain. I work largely with bloggers, content creators, people who have a lot of stuff. But in some cases, like we're creating new stuff. It's like, oh, I never thought of creating a blog post about that, or I should make a PDF about that. So this is also giving them time to create their things. Sometimes it's time for them to get new headshots or they're working on their website. Like there's a lot of stuff like overlapping. And so it tends to work out pretty well. It doesn't
where blogs were 15 years ago, 10 years ago is totally different than where they are now.
Yeah.
Like in 2010, I had a food blog and it started because I was like, oh, I just want to track recipes. And that was like my first exposure to the online world. And then, you develop all the little communities and I had no idea how much of a community blogging would create for me. And then I let it go because it lost my interest, and I'm not a photographer. And with food blogs,
so much photography.
We all know what food blogs are today, and mine was.
Oh my gosh,
we knew that.
Food bloggers are incredible. I went to a food blogging conference in Chicago earlier this spring.
You were just there, right?
Yeah, I was at Tastemakers in Chicago, or Tastemaker singular. But like, there's just so much about the tech side. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't even know how to make a recipe, but y'all have that down. So you're just learning about SEO now. Like, I'm just like, you need to make a recipe. And so I'm just in awe of food bloggers. They're so good at what they do. And then my job is just to make sure that their best content gets in front of their new subscriber right away. And there's like, everybody has their hangups with sending emails, like whether they're my clients or they're on my email list. So a lot of it is just talking through like, how has your brand changed or evolved? What's important to you? What are products or services or affiliates that are important to share? Like part of it is just like, these people don't know you. Like you might have shared that like last month, but they're never going to see that unless you put it in your automation. And so that's what we'll work on together. And sometimes it's creating new stuff, like new pages on their site. They're like, how have I never done that? I'm like, I don't know.
Well, that's like the same reason that anyone hires a copywriter. It's like, you can't get clear on it when it's all important to you. It's like there's a forest of ideas and you can't see it because you're like, well, there's this tree and this tree and this tree.
Well, and it's funny because like, if I have to learn it to be like, I have to learn it to be able to explain it as a copywriter to be able to write it down for someone else and I've had a client tell me, she goes, ever since we did your like my welcome sequence, that's how I explain my business to people. You summed it up in 3 points. And I was like, yeah, that's how my brain works. I was like, well, I think she does this, this, and this. And she goes, that's exactly what I do. How have I never thought to say it like that? And so it's just kind of been fun because I don't know, explain that like doing that work makes it easier for you to do your own work. Like to send out your newsletters, you're more clear about who you are and who you're talking to and what you've promised them. Like you're kind of connecting the dots. So some people
So you do like branding as a part of
essentially. It's all in there. My background's in advertising and PR. And so part of me is like, that messaging just has to be really clear. So like, what is it that sets you apart? Why are people here? Yeah. And like, I always have one email in the welcome sequence that's like your soapbox. Like what got you here? What changed in your life that you're like, this needs to happen, and you created it, because people are going to relate to that, or they're not, and they're going to bail, which is fine. But just like,
if they're not gonna, it's almost like you want them to bail if they're not the right audience.
Yeah, you're rat people or whoever said that. Yeah.
So I had a friend who moved to DC after college, and she's like, I finally feel like the bee girl in the Blind Melon No Rain video who is all sad. And at the end, she finds all of her bee people. I found all my bee people in DC instead of small town Michigan. I was like, I love it.
Absolutely.
So why bloggers, and how'd you kind of set off in that direction?
Gosh. Okay. So Memorial Day weekend, 2016. So is that 6 years ago? Math is so hard.
6. I don't see.
6 years ago, Memorial Day weekend, I was watching Gilmore Girls, decided to make a website all about how I would help people with their budgeting. So I actually come from the personal finance blogging space. I had about 4 or 5 blog posts before I went to my first FinCon, which is a big personal finance. It's beyond personal finance. There's like wealth advisors. There's all sorts of like fintech, big conference that happens in the fall. I went there with like 4 or 5 blog posts, and everyone was like, "You're new. You're so cute. Like, how did you get here? How did you even know we existed?" And I was like, "Great question." Somebody that we interviewed, or a client from my last job, told me about it, because I was like casually telling her how I like to budget. She goes, "Well, there's this whole group of people." So that is like how I got into blogging myself. And I'm just like a natural learner. I have 2 college degrees. Like one's just for kicks. I was like, well, I'm already pretty close to a history degree. Let's go for it. And so
we have so many parallels. I have a degree in Spanish for that very reason.
And so
I need 3 more classes. Why not?
My final semester of college, I was creating an entire like marketing campaign for a blind radio service, like radio service for the blind, and writing about the Louisiana Purchase. I was like, we got this. We're fine. My brain can do a lot of things. So that's where I came from. But yeah, like I just soaked up everything online, and we're just in an era where everything's available. So I'm learning about, like, I'm going to the webinars. I'm learning how webinars are working. I'm learning about sales pages. I'm learning about SEO and blog content and backlinks and like, all of the things. And so, yeah. And then it was just something I did on the side for a while. Yeah. And then, so as far as bloggers go, like I knew that when I started doing email marketing in particular, that's the audience that I wanted to work with. It's funny because everybody else I was in an email incubator with Val Geisler, and I swear everyone else was like e-com and SaaS, which are like super sexy things, right? Like I work in SaaS marketing, and I'm like, I want to work with bloggers that none of you guys have ever heard of. Crickets.
And they're awesome.
And so it took me a couple months, even after the incubator, to finally like claim that and be like, no, this is a place where people need help. Because I think of all of the people I met at FinCon, I'm like, you've been doing this for such a long time, and you have so much valuable content. And I don't think that I knew that they didn't have the confidence in their email marketing. And I was like, we can fix that. Especially with personal finance stuff, there's so much of it is sequential. Right? Like if you hop on an email list and they start talking about crypto and you're like, I'm here to budget. I've never budgeted. Like, how do I make sure that like where you're at when you join the email list is the kind of content you're getting? And then even like learning how to budget is its own sequential thing. So
I would say crypto in my eyes, at least they start to gloss over. We have a guy in one of the masterminds I'm in, and he's like super into it. And he did this great presentation. And I was like, yeah, I can take like 2 things out of this. And one of them is basically like, crypto may not be for me.
Okay. That's where I'm at. Like I joke with people, I'm like, I work in email marketing. I'm not exactly like on the forefront of like all new things. Like I'm like, I've been with Asana since 2013. Like, I have no desires to like just go make a lot of changes for the sake of a lot of changes. I know what works.
And that's important. That's really
It is
important.
important. Yeah. So for me, like, and then it evolved into the food blogging space because coming out of that incubator, Val got asked to be. She was the one who led it. She got asked to be on a podcast for bloggers, and she was like, actually, one of my students focuses on blogging, and I was the only one. And here I thought I was a loony person being like, I'm going to go work in the blogging space, not the SaaS, like e-com space. And so that's how I got introduced to like Food Blogger Pro, Pinch of Yum. Pinch of Yum was my first food blogging client, which is kind of bonkers to think about now. And like, I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but they're like a 7-figure food blog. They're
fantastic.
out of Minneapolis. They're the sweetest people to work with. So I've been working with food bloggers and money bloggers ever since, sharing valuable content to help people make people's lives easier. So
that's awesome. Well, and I think it's so cool that you started as a blogger because you understand so much of the thought process that goes into creating them.
Yeah.
And even though that, do you still blog?
No, I blog for your business. Yeah. I'm not a career blogger. No.
It's just such a different model and it's so cool. So you said, and I make everyone fill out this form that we never follow, but at least it gives me some points that I can like, okay, yeah, back to you. In case we get talking about, spring green and coffee and the weather.
Degrees.
Yeah, and how it's 90 degrees. But your start is unique, but you said you also like absorbed all the how to build a business online stuff. You sort of touched on that just now, but like, where did you go for information?
Like on how to start a business?
Yeah.
Well, I worked for a small business for 5.5 years. I actually went part-time there while I worked with a friend on her agency. And then when she decided to have twins, I was like, well, you do that. That feels like a lot for me to be employed by you when you're going to have 3 kids and you live in a different city. And so that's when I decided to start Duet on my own. So I've actually been self-employed since the beginning of 2018. So over 4 years. It's kind of crazy.
So exciting.
But my old boss that I worked for, it was a small company. I did HR, I did bookkeeping, I did project management. I set up all of our templates and systems in Asana and Google Docs, like pretty early on. Did like client relationship stuff with them. And that, and I'm trying to think of where else I really learned. Oh, I did cold call sales for like, we hadn't actually had an online
all roads have led you to this point.
Yeah. I joked to my old boss. I was like, I'm here because you taught me too much. Like, but they were super sweet and they let me go. I was part-time with them for over a year while I built up my business. So it was actually the beginning of 2020 that I didn't have any W-2 work at all. So it took me like a year and a half, right?
That's exciting.
Yeah. So
did things take off for you in 2020? What was 2020 like for you?
Let's see. The reason why
it really took off in 2019.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. The pandemic, I don't want to say it didn't affect me. It did, especially like not being able to have those big conferences, like where I'm able to connect with people. Like that's my number one place to connect and meet new clients. But like it helps that I do project-based work, not retainer work. And so people had already like paid to work with me and the job was going to get done. And so I didn't really have to worry about like losing recurring revenue, which was really good. And I had to joke that it was like all my clients were like, I kid you not, one of my clients is like a sourdough bread baker. Like that was her blog. So her blog just like exploded with the pandemic.
Yeah.
It was like, I want to make bread. And she's like, great, here's this course I've already set up. Like go through it. And then I had another one. They're a cross stitching brand. So I'm like, oh, everybody with their at-home hobbies, here's cross-stitching. And then everyone else was like budgeting and finance. And so it was like, I think my clients are good, so I'm good. And yeah, so it just made it a little bit more difficult to get new clients, I think. And, just with that conference being MIA for a year, which is kind of a downer. But
so how often do you go to conferences? Like, obviously things are just kind of back online this year.
Yeah. Ideally, be like twice a year.
A couple times a year.
Okay. Like FinCon, coming out of FinCon, I've gotten so many clients like what was it, October of this last year, I got 11 new clients. Not all from FinCon, like a good 5 of them from FinCon. But I was like booked through March, like October through March. And so that's pretty sweet. But then I also went to 2 conferences in March of this year and got 0 clients. So
do you feel like it's 0 clients coming out of that, or just that it's going to take a while to build?
I think one is going to take a while to build. The other one, that conference got canceled. It was too small.
Oh,
for the future. So I was like, bummer, because I'm all about investing in things, like going to these conferences, learning about what people are talking about and the mood and the vibe and all that. But yeah, and that's Tastemaker I'd like to go back to, but everyone's like super shy and also very well dressed. I was like, food bloggers be dressed in what? Like there was somebody in stilettos, and I was like, no, I didn't even own a pair.
So I went to the Copywriter Club conference in March, and it was like, I was like talking about all the shoes, and there were a couple people who are really dressed up, but I think they are just like super into fashion in general. And then I'm like, so I have leather leggings. These are my fancy leggings. They're not leather, they're fake leather. But like, yeah, just a different vibe, I think, different people. But it makes sense, I guess. Food blogging is really all about the image.
There's a lot of aesthetic involved. I was like, can we get a group thread on like everyone's backpacks? Like that's what I was like. I just want to know where you all got your bags. Yeah, but like that conference was super cool because I liked that it talked to the blogger like very holistically. So it wasn't just about how to grow your blog. There were things like how to like invest well, which I had taken for granted because I'm in the FinCon space. And I was like, people know how to invest. Oh, food bloggers probably don't. And so you have this gal who's like teaching them about investing, and that was pretty cool. So being able to kind of look at the whole picture was cool.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's so cool. I'm so glad that we can be back at conferences again. And I hadn't been to one since I ran them, which was 10 years ago at this point. And so it was really cool to be on the attendee side. Yeah. But it just validated that I need to be going to more of them.
Yeah. So. I love them. They can be exhausting. And I'm an extrovert saying that. And so I can't go to too many, but I would go to 4 a year if I could, if I knew that they were like really good online.
So where, and you're in Lincoln, right? So you can more or less easily get places. There's probably a couple of hops most places, but yeah.
We have Omaha is like an hour away, so that takes you most places.
Awesome. Well, so what would you tell anyone? Like well, I guess maybe even more than that. What's the biggest misconception you face when you're talking to bloggers who are looking to work with you?
Gosh. Well, I will say it's really interesting because the demographic of bloggers is really wide. So like the people who want to work with me are the people who like when they meet me and like they'll hop on a sales call and book within a couple days. Like they just know. Whereas then you have a lot of people who are just really new and learning, and they're the DIYers, which I'm like, I appreciate that. That was me. But the biggest like, I don't know, like misconception.
Well, maybe another way to look at it is, they're writers as well, right?
Oh, yeah.
Is there any kind of conversations that happen on the different kinds of writing, what you do for them versus what they do?
No, not really. I have a couple bloggers who are also cookbook authors or people who are authors like in general. They are a lot more particular about how things sound. It's like, I don't get offended when they like rewrite the whole intro to an email. Like I just can't, because I'm like, the content is there. The purpose of the email is there. And if you want to make it sound more like you, have at it. It's your email. Like, but I'm fine providing the framework for you. Like, and then I have other clients who don't touch it because they're like,
this is perfect. We love it.
I literally had a client recently have no edits to the copy doc, no edits to the emails once they were formatted. My team was like, did that just happen? I was like, it did. And we're going to
I always I get a little nervous when that happens sometimes because it's like
nothing.
What's going on here? Like, did they like it? Did they what? I mean, even like there's usually like one word, nothing else.
Yeah, and so it's when it comes to like the actual copywriting. No, they trust me with that. Part of it is just like that's why we do a copy prep doc, is that they are the experts on a topic. I am not. Like I have this client who's like does finance and like we're going to be doing investing soon. And like there's basics to investing, which I understand, like stock market stuff. But then there's like crypto. And I'm like, ooh, we're going to have to do some like, I'm going to need you to walk me through this if I'm going to walk anybody else through it, you know? So like there requires a little bit more.
Well, I'm impressed that you can break down crypto enough to walk other people through it. There was a group that I was in, they're like, what's an NFT? And I'm like, I can give you the baseline definition.
I can't do that. That's like, I'm going to be studying like for this next project. So like we request that information, like, and that's part of why my company is called Duet is like, I can bring as much as I can to the table, but you're also the subject matter expert on what you're doing. And that includes food bloggers. Like I have food bloggers who are vegan, who have a certain emphasis, or Italian food bloggers. And I'm like, I don't know anything about Italian food. I mean, I know how to eat, but that's it. Like, and so like these certain ingredients or where you find them and things like that. I'm like I'll come up with those questions. And I think that adds a lot of depth to the content because I'm like, this is what me as somebody who's never done this before is thinking. Can we add in a little bit more to like answer those questions and
talk about your approach? And yeah, well, I think what's really interesting is like, because you can go look up everything. I'm like talking with my hands. Apparently
I'm sitting on mine because I talk with my hands.
I generally have to, but yeah. So, I mean, I think because you can look anything up online, like what you bring to the table, your clients, whoever is your approach and this like crazy conglomeration of life experience that all lead you to this point. And I think that's what's so cool, not only about what you do, but about what they do. And that's how you help them come alive because they don't necessarily see that like, oh, well, we've done outside sales, we've done finance. Hey, we cook a lot too. And here are all the things that push us here. So I think that's so cool. And I don't think enough people leverage everything about your background.
Well, and it's looking at the whole brand. So I do welcome sequences and nurture sequences. And so it's like, what does everyone need to know about you, no matter where they come in from? And that is like, that's a lot of information to put in like 4 or 5 emails, 3 to 5 emails. And then the idea is that like somebody at that point, after they complete that, could pivot to any other direction. They could pivot to a different segment, like a different sequence of content, or they could just all go into one big nurture sequence. But even then, it's like, we also want to make sure that the reader has a breadth of understanding of the kind of content you provide. So like I have a client, she does like cocktails, mom hacks, and like recipes, like snacky recipes. And it's like, oh, let's just make sure that we're like including all of those on a regular basis so that people who are new here know that all those things exist. So if that makes sense. So like personal finance, it's like, oh yeah, we talk about student loans, this, and this. And if it's going to be a general nurture sequence, make sure we include some of that over and over again. So like, to me, it feels like obvious. And we're going to be answering some of the biggest questions. And we learn about those questions and what people are looking for through the audience research, through Google Analytics. And then we just ask the client, we're like, okay, what content do you have that teaches how to do this? So they might think that they have that content, but they're like, actually, no, it's all in my head, or it's all like broken up into like 10 different blog posts. And so that's usually why they end up creating something new, much more concise.
That's super exciting. I want to talk more about this, and maybe we can schedule another one and talk about like the most essential elements of a nurture sequence, because I think that would be super valuable.
Here for it.
Yeah. I have all these ideas. So real quickly, before we end the official broadcast, where can people go to find you? I popped all the links that you gave me into the thing here so that everyone should have access to them. But is there, where would you like for them to go first?
Yeah. So, I mean, the most valuable place I would say is to hop on my email list. So if you go to duet.co, duett.co, there are a handful of resources on the resources page that are free. But I send out all of the content. All my teaching content goes out on Tuesdays. And a lot of my newer like announcements or brand new content goes out on Thursdays. So that's where you're going to get all the best.
I realize I'm not on your mailing list. I need to change that. I know.
Well, and I always tell people, I'm like, just reply back to an email. It's me. I'm the one answering. So that's the best place to like really learn. And I'm saying this because I understand email marketing and I understand there's a lot of it. And so for you to not get overwhelmed, but to continue to learn, be hopping on the email list. Otherwise, you can follow me at Ali Grummert on Instagram. You can always DM me there. I'm not super active, but I'm there because I
But you're
stole
there.
everybody else's stuff. So you can always hit me up there too. So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much today. This is so much fun.
thank
I'm
you.
so glad I decided to do this because it gives me a way to talk to people and it
Love it.
forces me to have conversations every week, which is
I,
good.
I
So,
am
Erin,
envious. I love that you get to do this.
well, we can talk more about that in just a minute. So, thank you